Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. A story that may have gone under the radar for you in this last week has been the story of two liberal senators choosing to cross the floor and join the conservative Senate caucus. Or I guess I mean to say they were independent senators who joined the conservative caucus because former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had this strange habit of appointing his senators not as liberals but as independents, and they would go join the independent caucus, which made Justin Trudeau seem very moderate and centrist, even though many of his Senate picks were to the left of the typical liberal member of parliament. Now it seems two of the more moderate liberals are just sick of the way that the liberals do things, and now they're choosing to go sit with the conservatives, I guess, to retain some level of dignity in their political careers. So these senators are Senator David Richard Adam Richards for New Brunswick, as well as Senator Mary Jane McCallum, both I believe Trudeau appointments, at least the one, David Adam Richards, is a Trudeau appointment, and now sitting over in the Conservative Senate caucus, which is being led by Senator Leo Housakis. Again, this isn't like the biggest coup on the planet because the Senate oftentimes is a rubber stamp for whoever is in government, but it is a telling that as a senator who doesn't really have to do anything, you still are not comfortable being with the other liberals in the Senate, and now you want to go sit with the conservatives. Here's a quote from the National Post that they got from David Adam Richards that I think is very elucidating on his mindset when he was crossing, and it probably is the exact sort of way that also Jane McCallum was, or Mary Jane McCallum was also thinking when she moved over. But what he said, David Adam Richards, is, quote, for years, so many of the concerns I and others had about our country were dismissed by an insular, self absorbed government with almost blind indifference to ordinary men and women, wrote Richards. And then he went on to say, now the liberals are insisting on policies that certain senators pleaded for and were so often ridiculed and refused. And yeah, so he then basically goes on from to say in other statements that the liberals were very obviously plagiarizing ideas from the conservatives, and that if they're going to just openly plagiarize Tory policies, then he may as well go and join the conservatives who are actually championing the ideas that are getting passed. And so, what I also think went on here, because he never left under Trudeau, he's leaving under Mark Carney, possibly because some of the senators were seeing what would happen once Mark Carney took over for Justin Trudeau. Was there going to be a real change in leadership style? Was the government going to change priorities like David Adam Richards had highlighted? Are they going to talk about the things that actually matter to ordinary men and women? And not really. If you look at the current liberal agenda, it's pretty much just microwave Justin Trudeau stuff, with maybe Mark Carney having a little bit more competence in driving towards their policy goals, which is not even necessarily a good thing because many of their policy goals are terrible. Look at Bill C3 for a prime example. Let's just give citizenships to anyone who spent 3 years in Canada and has a citizenship, even if it's not 3 consecutive years of being here back to back. As long as they're here for, a couple months here and there and they have a citizenship, they should be able to pass Canadian citizenship onto their children, even if they're being born overseas and that person has no intention of coming back to Canada. Just an awful, awful policy. Increasing the industrial carbon tax, the carbon border adjustment, all this is absolutely ridiculous. And so again, we'll probably have to see a little bit more of what these senators say over the coming days, but this has been a development over the last week. There could be more senators coming over from here. Because again, I genuinely just think there's a lot of people in the Liberal Senate caucus or Independent caucus who aren't full on leftists who want to make sure that people don't think that they're like complete, you know, ideologues, and that they can actually, like they have far broader horizons than the very metropolitan progressive politics of the Liberal Party. And at the end of the day, ideology doesn't matter when we're just trying to solve things like inflation, when we need to lower taxes. unless you're just a full-on zealot for the liberals and you just believe in their very high tax, high spending, subsidy agenda, anti-oil and gas agenda, at some point, even someone who's like a pretty consistent liberal will have to say, like, guys, people can't make ends meet. Maybe we should lower taxes. But now I want to move on to another thing that the liberals are doing right now that I think highlights, again, why their appeal is going to be very short-lived. Right now, their numbers are up. Obviously, they just won government, so they're in a bit of a honeymoon right now. But they're pushing this modular home idea, which could it have some limited success? Sure. As long as you put anything into the ground that people can live in, it is going to take some pressure off the housing market. But I think something like this in the long run is going to be viewed as one of those key insults to Canadians, one of those kind of political generation defining insults that at a time when young Canadians couldn't afford homes, they basically started pitching the idea of having prefabricated two-room houses that can be put up for people in order to satisfy them. This isn't exactly what your parents were getting back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, but now you have to put up with literally living in a cheddar box.
Mr. Speaker, one of the policies the Prime Minister campaigned on was building modular housing. That is a way to get more homes built faster, and we know that by removing barriers to internal trade in our country, we can get a modular housing industry going in our country. Exactly. That is one of the solutions to the housing crisis. I hope the members opposite will be constructive and support this important legislation.
Honourable member for York Durham.
Mr. Speaker, my generation refuses to live in a shipping container.
A very good way of putting it from Jacob Mantle here. And I think that is something, again, that is kind of going to define why this is going to be a very short-lived policy win for the Liberals, even if they start getting a lot of these modular homes built. They're basically bribing people. The idea is they don't want to get rid of all the regulations that make it difficult to build. They don't really want to lower overall taxes, although they are stealing the conservative idea of removing the GST on new homes. But they don't really want to change the current government structure. So instead, they'll just give you less home that you can purchase to technically make it cheaper, even though per square foot, these homes are costing way more than they should. Back in the day, it didn't cost very much to be able to build quite large homes. And we're not in the point in Canada where we can't build large homes anymore. Like, oh, we're just too big. We're in here like tooth and jowl or whatever. We're like way too packed in, so we need smaller houses. If they just made it easier to build, cities could easily expand, old houses could be torn down, and large houses could be put on their mostly empty lots. We don't need to descend into building, sixplexes and modular homes to do what we could do easier in the 1950s and 60s of just getting regulations out of the way, blanket approving an area for building, and just getting it done. But I'll go back to Jacob Mantle here, keeping in his lead up.
My generation refuses to live in a shipping container. Oxford Economics reports yesterday that Toronto's housing market ranks among the worst in the world for affordability. At the same time, mortgage delinquency rates in Toronto are higher than at any time during the pandemic. The financial burden is suffocating the next generation of homebuyers. And history has shown us, Mr. Speaker, if you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. A budget is a plan, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the Prime Minister is, when will Canadians see one?
That's another good point that reminds me of something else I want to talk about. With the budget, although the Conservatives have been bringing it up a lot, so it's hard to miss this as a key issue right now, that the Liberals are promising a lot of stuff that they do not have the budget for. And when I say they don't have the budget for it, I mean they copied and pasted Justin Trudeau's budget from 2024 into 2025. They have very few cost savings that they found. Yeah, I guess they don't need to send out the consumer carbon tax rebates, so that saves them like a small bit of money. But they also got rid of the consumer carbon tax that was paying for those rebates. And at the same time, they're jacking up the industrial carbon tax, but not giving out rebates. So basically, the government is now just bringing in that revenue for itself and not even cutting people checks anymore. But the liberals are promising things like these modular home programs, and they're going to now raise our GDP spending on the military to 2% of our GDP. But we don't have a spending plan that bakes that stuff in. Because again, we copied and pasted Trudeau's plan from 24 into 2025. But then we're going to be increasing military spending from like 1.2 or 1.3% of GDP up to 2%. That's not something that we have budgeted right now. So our current budget could easily pass 600 billion, 650 billion this year, because these are big spending items that are not baked into the previous budget that they're proposing spending for.
10 years ago, Canada's defense spending fell to less than 1% of GDP. It has since doubled in cash terms, but it's still not close enough to face these mounting risks.
He's kind of sideswiping Stephen Harper here, because yes, in the last year of Stephen Harper's leadership of the country, our GDP spending on the military fell to like 0.8 or something like that, and then it had been almost doubled by Trudeau. The problem is the spending wasn't the problem. We should be spending more. It's the allocation. So when he's proposing, as he's going to get to here, of spending 2% of GDP on the military, we don't really have any way of absorbing that properly into, tanks, jets, arms, artillery, because we currently spend more than we did under Harper, but under Harper, we actually had a functioning military, and under Justin Trudeau, with far more spending, our military has mostly turned into an HR department that has a few guns lying around.
The brave women and men who are protecting our sovereignty do not have the resources they need for a riskier world. Our military infrastructure and equipment have aged, hindering our military preparedness. I'll give an example or two. Only one of our 4 submarines is seaworthy. Less than half our maritime fleet and land vehicles are operational. More broadly, we're too reliant on the United States. And so for all those reasons, I'm announcing today that Canada will achieve NATO's 2% of GDP target this year, half a decade ahead of schedule.
But again, this isn't even part of the current budget. His spending bill he's put forward, the OIC, the Order in Council, $33 billion that he signed himself over, doesn't include this 2%. I'm all for getting to 2%, but I'd also want to cut wasteful spending and cut taxes at the same time, which is totally doable. But he doesn't want to do those other two things, so he's just going to jack up spending on the military with no real plan on spending it. Again, he was the economic advisor for Trudeau for 5 straight years. He could have stuck his finger in more pies than just the economy. Somehow, when he was around for 5 years, he wasn't able to influence things enough to actually put some money towards the military to create jobs. This is during COVID. You could have even said, well, we want to make sure those submarines are seaworthy, so we're going to throw a bunch of our COVID money towards them to create jobs for people to repair them and get them up to the, to that seaworthy level. We could have done that, but he never did it at the time. He never suggested it. There was no action taken on it under Trudeau when he was around and a heavy influence on the government. So I don't really trust he's doing anything now other than creating a jobs program that isn't actually going to make the military any better off. It will, but I don't think to the amount of money that we're spending. We're not going to be getting good bang for our buck, just as we were under Stephen Harper, where the amount of money we put forward was actually going towards the right things. And now under Trudeau, with far more spending, we were not getting any of the right things. So I don't think taking what we currently spend and then jacking it up to 2% is going to be actually beneficial, at least in the short to medium term. I think that it's going to take this government quite a long time to actually sort itself out. Because if you think these guys are going to cut the worthless jobs inside the military and shift back to actual equipment and soldiery, you're out of your minds. These people are totally fine with the military being a repository for, people in HR and management and bureaucracy. Anyways, so that should be it for me today, guys. I do want to quickly plug something because I mentioned it yesterday, but I kind of want to mention it from here on out. I'm not going to say it every video, but if you live in the city of Calgary, I have a link below in the description as well as pinned at the top of the comments for Sonia Sharp's mayoral website. Make sure you sign up for a lawn sign if you live in Calgary because we actually need a conservative mayor, and Sonia Sharp is the most conservative person who can actually win running for the mayoralship. So make sure you sign up for that. I've had people reach out to me and say, like, well, Jeff Davison is a conservative. Not really. You read his website and he won't even commit to cutting spending. He's just saying, I'm going to freeze taxes. What do you mean freeze taxes? Because even if you freeze the rate, taxes will still go up because people's home values go up over time, and your property tax rate is based on the home value. That is the weaselly way that previous mayors have actually raised the amount of tax that you're paying by just reevaluating your house upward very aggressively, even kind of going over what your house is probably really worth in order to extract more dollars from you. I think a new mayor needs to actually reduce the rate. So even if your house value goes up, you're paying less in property taxes. This is a bit of a Calgary rabbit hole, but again, I encourage people, if you live in the city, preemptively sign up to get a lawn sign. You're probably not going to get it right away. Mayoral election is until October, but do it now because we need to box out all of these fake conservatives so that we have someone who can actually win in the mayor's race rather than scrambling in the last month and trying to get behind one guy, which never works. You get behind someone early and you stick to them. And I'm getting behind Sonia Sharp, who I think is probably the best person for the job. I'm going to break down some polling for the Calgary mayoral race because that's actually an interesting thing to dissect polling on. People have been trying to put around polls showing, well, see, Jeff Davison has like 14% and Sonia Sharp only has 7%. Okay, the problem with that is the person leading those polls is like at 25%, and it's Jeremy Farkas, and behind him is Jody Gondek. Is it because those two people are good candidates? No, it's because we're so far out. Polling just says, whose name do you recognize? And that's it. Gondek didn't even have the highest name recognition in the 2021 race, but she won because her campaign was well run. Jeremy Farkas had the highest name recognition last time and got clobbered. Arguably, Jeff Davison had higher name recognition than Jody Gondek did, and he also got clobbered because they ran bad campaigns because they weren't really that conservative, so the conservatives didn't turn out for them. So we're trying to change it this year. Make sure you buy a lawn sign, not buy a lawn sign, sign up for a lawn sign if you live in Calgary. So anyways, that's it for me today, guys. See you later.